Sweet Success is brought to you by Hospitality.fm, the podcast network for hospitality professionals.
I'm Casey Kavanagh, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I'm thrilled, truly honored to welcome a powerhouse in the world of communications to the show, Katie Kavanagh. Katie is the Chief Communications Officer at Visa, where she is responsible for all aspects of corporate and brand communications, reputation management, and executive visibility. Prior to her current role, she was the Chief Communications Officer at both AT&T and Bacardi. But I first had the privilege of working for her during her incredible 18-year tenure at Starwood Hotels and Resorts, where she was the SVP of Global Communications. Katie, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh, Katie, I'm so excited to be here. I've become like an avid listener. You are so good at this. And I got to say, I'm like a little nervous to be on this side of the camera, but I'm sure you'll put me at ease.
It's so funny because a lot of people who have come through the Katie Kavanagh School of Communications, like myself, have said the exact same thing. We're used to being behind the scenes. We're used to being the ones
Totally.
prepping our executives. And I think it's really fun to have you guys on the spot.
I know. And I had to like prep myself. I did like all of my talk points and stuff like that. Cause I like no one knows like the crazy times in the hotel business and at Starwood like I do. It's only in my brain. So I prep myself. So we'll see how it goes.
I love it. I have so much to talk to you about today. We could do a whole separate episode on just how incredible of a communicator you are and things like that, like talk points behind the scenes and being ready to convey your message, which you're just the absolute best at. But I want to start off by talking about one of my favorite subjects, Starwood Hotels and Resorts.
Mine
Obviously, as
too.
I mentioned in your intro, you were there for 18 years, which is nearly the entire lifespan of the company.
Mhm.
Prior to that, you spent about 7 years looking after PR for Hyatt, but what was Starwood like when you joined, and did you have a sense at the time how monumental this role and this company were going to be? After hosting for more than 2 years, I finally made the decision to switch to Lodgify, and honestly, I should have done it sooner. If you haven't heard of them yet, Lodgify is a property management software built for short-term rentals and boutique hotels. They make it easy to manage your calendar, update cross channel listings, automate guest messages, connect with OTAs, and even build a direct booking website. What I love most is that it's intuitive, it's organized, and most importantly, it's setting me up for what's next, whether that be adding more short term rentals to my portfolio or maybe opening a boutique hotel one day. Lodgify is the kind of platform that grows with you. Visit lodgify.com and use code SWEET20, that's sweet like hotel suite, to get 20% off their annual plans today. Check out the link in the show notes for more.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so I was really young when I was recruited to Starwood. And it's like typical hotel fashion. It was someone I'd worked with at Hyatt who had gone to uh, Sheridan, who was then acquired by Starwood. And they said, we're hiring a new head of PR. You'd be great. And I think I was like 26 or 27. I was super young. But of course, Barry Sternlicht, our founder, I think was only like 37 or 38. So like it was a young company. But I got the job. It was like the hot job, and going to work for Starwood was a super hot thing to do at that time, because they had just acquired Sheridan and Westin. So when I arrived, it was absolutely insane because these three companies were coming together. There was Starwood, Sheridan, and Westin. So there were like three presidents, there were three CFOs, there were three CMOs, there were like, hundreds of SVPs. And it was like a gladiator death match. These guys were like all fighting for their survival, and they were all guys, of course. And like, I remember I arrived in the office on my first day, and like we were in this like janky building in White Plains. It had been the Tampax headquarters, and Like, I had a desk in my office, but there was no chair, and I had to steal a chair from someone I mean, it was just, like, insane. Um, and, there was all this palace intrigue going on, and we weren't doing well because we weren't together. There were so many troubles with the integration. So, like, I think we like missed 2 quarters in a row. But anyway, while this chaos was happening, there was also this amazing creativity. And so in December of 98, we introduced W Hotels. We launched W Hotels. In February of 99, we launched SPG and it's no blackouts, which would like forever change loyalty. And then in August of 99, we launched the Heavenly Bed. So, like, in less than a year, we did these 3 revolutionary things that would change the hotel business forever. So, yeah, I knew something pretty special was going on.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, those 3 alone are momentous moments in hotel history,
Yeah. And
and
less
you were
than
a part
9
of
months,
them.
Katie. I mean, that's like crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, let's talk about the Westin Heavenly Bed first. Prior to launching that, hotels had those itchy floral bedspreads that
Yeah,
were just absolutely hideous, and now white linens are really table stakes in the hotel industry, and even in the short-term rental industry, we're seeing that catch
totally.
on as well. So, how did that whole idea come up? How did the launch come
Oh
together?
my
Give
God.
us the behind the scenes on that.
Oh, to this day, I mean, I don't know how long I've been working. I'm not going to tell you, but that was still like the pinnacle of my career, the launch of the Heavenly Bed. And, once again, this was like a Barry vision. And he put white beds in that first W hotel. And then he said, you know what, I'm going to put white beds in all the Westins. And, all these like dyed in the wool hotel guys were like, you can't have a white bed in a hotel room. That's like, you can't do it. And he said, well, you guys figure it out. And they're like, but the stains. He's like, I don't care. Figure it out. And I remember this one day when we were in the run up to launching the Heavenly Bed, we went to the Westin in Stamford, and in the ballroom they set up like 30 beds, and we had a bed test. We had clipboards, and we'd go from bed to bed, and decide which one was most comfortable. And then they figured out how to do the white bed that would be sort of stain resistant. There were only 3 stains that they couldn't get out, and to this day I don't know what the stains are because I don't want to know. But we like figured out how to do this white bed, and um, it was also the time that, all this palace intrigue was happening, like I talked about before. And so no one was really paying attention to me except for Barry. And I said, we gotta, this is like such a big deal. We gotta do something cool. He's like, go nuts. And so I did. And like, you gotta remember, like, heretofore, like hotel PR was like guys in suits with gigantic, scissors cutting a ribbon. But I decided to pattern it after, the Victoria's Secret, holiday show. It was like when they had first done their lingerie catalog or whatever, and they were everywhere. They were on Wall Street, they were in Grand Central Station, they were on the Today Show, they were on CNBC, they were just all over the place. And it was very early in sort of experiential marketing and sort of the sort of spectacle kind of stuff. So I just went for it, and I think I had $250,000 to launch it, which in those days was like a fortune. I felt
Yeah.
like a college kid with like $100 in my pocket and my parents' gas card, and I could do anything. And so really with a team of like 3, we did this massive launch where we put beds all over the country in the craziest places. Like there was a bed at the top of the Space Needle in Seattle and like floating down, the river in Boston. And, every city had a bed in weird places. And we had beds all out in front of the New York Stock Exchange and at Grand Central. And I'll never forget it. Like 6:30 that morning, the day of the launch, Barry came, walked up to the stock exchange, and all the beds were there with beautiful models, and it was really ethereal. And he did like a Mary Tyler Moore. He twisted around. He's like, "Oh my God, who did this?" And I was like, "I did." He's like, "This is amazing." And, we were all over the press, a cover story in USA Today, and Barry was on CNBC. And I think we were in like every newspaper and every kind of local news around the country. So it was really like a big deal. But, people, I think the other hotel companies were kind of like, how they do that? And Barry's
Mhm.
thing was like, this is the right place to invest. I mean, literally at the heart of hotels, what we sell is sleep.
Mhm.
Um, so this is, this is worth investing in and doing the R&D and all that kind of stuff. And, I think about it every time, like when I go to visit my daughter at college in Winston-Salem, I stay at the Best Western Plus because it's very close to campus and it's clean. But whenever I walk in that room and I see that white bed, I just laugh because it's a total debt to the Westin Heavenly Bed. And, it really did change the business.
Investing in the bed is so fascinating, and we'll talk about, of course, the acquisition of Starwood by Marriott, but I remember being in Stamford after the acquisition closed and Arnie Sorensen taking the stage and kind of speaking to us for the first time as Starwood associates who were maybe or maybe not about to become Marriott associates.
Mhm.
And him bringing up, like, how obvious that was, but yet no one had thought of it. He's like, "We are in the business of selling nights of sleep. How did we not think about the bed?" But what I actually wanna talk more about is the incredible story that you just shared of having the almost permission
Mhm.
to market it and PR it in a way that had never been done before. And even for you, you had spent 7 years at Hyatt, so you were around the ribbon cutting and the, like, "This is
Totally.
how we do
Oh, I
hotel
knew my way around
PR."
I knew where to get those big scissors,
You
trust
knew
me.
where to buy the big scissors. Like, how did you even, of course, you have always been someone who's, hyper aware of everything going on, and you referenced the Victoria's Secret fashion show. But how did you have maybe the confidence to say, "Let's try something completely new, which maybe will fail?"
Oh my god, I think back on that a lot because I would like to channel my younger self. I have no idea, like, what gave me the balls to do that. I really don't, but I was like, Barry, I think it was Barry, like, he was inspiring us because he was doing these things that were, like, turning conventional wisdom on its head
Yeah.
and, telling us, like, "Go out, be cool, like, don't do the giant scissors, go nuts." So, like, I think he really inspired us to think differently and do differently, and our mindsets all changed, and I was always creative, and I was always, like, inspired by fashion and, you know, the great marketers of the world. And then I was living in New York and I was 20 something. It was like sort of Sex in the City days. And every night you were going to some cool nightclub or some opening of XYZ. So like I was inspired by the city. And I don't know. I just like no one was paying attention to me. Like I don't think I had a boss then. I can't even remember. I mean, it was such chaos. So I just like went for it. So I try and channel that actually sometimes. And
Yeah,
like
I
just
love that.
needed to get on with it and do it and just like go for it. It doesn't have to be perfect, although we made things pretty perfect. So, but it was very liberating. It was a ton of fun and it was just cool to be cool.
You mentioned turning conventional wisdom on its head, and I feel like that is a great intro into the launch of W Hotels. So again, give us the behind the scenes of how that brainchild came to exist.
Well, I mean, I think Barry would tell you. I mean, if I remember the lore correctly, and God knows I sat in with him and, enough interviews, he actually bought, he started Starwood Hotels to do W and he bought all these like kind of rundown hotels, but in good locations in Chicago and New York and other places. And he had this vision to do um, like a boutique hotel where you could actually get your facts. Because he liked like sort of the Schrager hotels, but it was just they were all fun, but no business.
Mhm.
So he wanted to be able to go to cool hotels yet still be able to do his business there and that kind of stuff. So he had this vision for W very early on, and I think he really bought Westin and Sheridan so that he could do the loyalty program to make this brand sing. So this was very early on in the Starwood days that he was conceiving of this, and he really did it in secret with like just a few people. And I remember I was not part of that inner circle my first 2 months on the job. I think W launched in December and I had started in October of that year, but I knew there were things going on upstairs and that we were, going to introduce this new hotel brand. And, we were definitely not trotting out the scissors. And literally, we opened up that W on Lexington Avenue in New York City. And from day one, there were lines around the block. I remember we had to redo the floors, like in the lobby, and like, the GM was freaking out. We have to redo the floors. And Barry's like, that's the best problem I've ever heard of. Like, that's amazing because there was so much wear and tear from people coming in and out.
Right.
Like, almost immediately, we raised the rates. Like, I think Barry had conceived of W being like more of a competitor to like the Marriotts and the Hyatts of the world, but the
Mhm.
market pulled it up, which like never happens. And they were just so creative and cool. And the lobbies were these hip, cool bars. The Gerber brothers did the bars, and the rooms were like off the charts cool. And it's vibey, and the restaurant was like not like a place where you go get a cheeseburger or a club sandwich. It was like fantastic food. Um, so it really did like turn heads from day one. And I think internally it gave us all like this change of mindset. Like, wow, the hotel business doesn't have to be like these big boring convention hotels. So it made us sort of question kind of every aspect of the hotel experience and say, how can we do that differently?
Mhm.
And like one of my favorite stories about W was that like Barry and his wife sort of conceived of this around their kitchen table. And he said even the name was deliberate. It was W, which was like, an upside down M. So W was really like the anti Marriott. And we really ran with that at Starwood, let me tell you. You know.
That is amazing, especially knowing what transpired over the next decade or so.
Yeah, if we only had a crystal ball, I know.
I remember a great story you guys shared about after the acquisition, which, like you said, really overnight made Starwood a competitor with the Marriotts and the Hiltons and the
Mhm.
Hyatts of this world. That there was a piece of press coverage that came out where Bill Marriott famously called Barry Sternlicht a kid with a backpack. He was kind of
Yeah,
dismissing him, right? What was
yeah.
the reaction like to that comment internally?
Oh my god. People were, went bananas. They were so outraged, like, how could Bill Marriott call Barry just some kid with a backpack, and like, "What are you gonna do about it, Casey?" I'm like, "What am I supposed to do? Like, call Bill Marriott and say, 'Take it back'?" And but people were really giving me heat, like, "You gotta fix this." I mean, you know how it is in town. And, I was like, "Huh." And I had an idea, and I like went and I went on my computer and I found like some clip art of a backpack, and I made like 100 copies, and I just started passing them out to people in their offices and their cubes. And I was like, yeah, we are the kid with the backpack. Marriott is like the old stodgy guard, and we're like the new cool kids. And we really then kind of leaned into that. And we were cheeky and we had fun doing it. And I think we sort of good naturedly made fun of Marriott, although, we always knew they were the big kahuna. But we did really lean into being sort of the anti-Marriott, and there was good business reason to do that because like we were never going to compete with them on scale. We were never going to compete with them on, value engineering or operational efficiency. I mean, they were masterful at that. So we had to play like a different game.
Mhm.
So it really did inspire us to like really focus on brands and innovation and new products and loyalty. I mean, boy, did we focus on loyalty and like just play a different game. And we also became obsessed with being first.
Mhm.
Um, and coming out of the gate with new innovation. And like anytime we caught wind that Marriott was working on something, oh my God, like we were going to get it out to market sooner. Then they would like, pick up on it and make it better because they knew how to value engineer things and all that kind of stuff. But man, we were going to be first. And it was like one of these epic rivalries that spurred amazing competition that benefited everyone.
Mhm.
Benefited hotel owners because we produced a better product that was more sought after. And, eventually we would get the price down on the things that we created. For consumers, I mean, total home run, right? I mean, the white beds, the great hotel experience, the good drink in the bar, like all the things that we've sort of come to take for granted, was because of that rivalry.
Mhm.
Uh, and, I mean, of course, we kind of had to walk it back. It was always, listen, it was always fun and good natured. But we sort of had to walk it back when our rival, our biggest rival acquired us. Uh, that was another story.
Well, it's kind of in a way like what happened with the first W Hotel and needing to redo the floors. When your biggest rival is acquiring you, it is almost showing that you did well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, listen, Arnie Sorensen would say that he acquired us for all the things that we really did lean into for,
Yeah.
our brand prowess, for a global footprint, for our loyalty program, for the fact that we really connected with, I guess, that time millennials, but next generations. And, I will never forget, he said on an analyst call, that one of the reasons they acquired us was for our amazing PR, which I think
Mhm.
was probably like the first time in history a CEO said we bought them for their PR, which made us really proud, if you'll recall. So, anyway, so I think it was like one of those Coke Pepsi things, it was really cool.
Yeah. I love hearing about the intentionality around playing a completely different game because
Mhm.
I messaged you probably a year or so ago when I was listening to the podcast Business Wars, and they had done a whole series on Hilton versus Marriott. So again, these are two people playing, or two brands, two companies playing the same game, some winning at scale, then when the other winning at scale.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there is an episode which, listeners, Casey Kavanagh is mentioned by name in, about this conversation around W hotels, and it's just proof of everything you're saying. You're playing a completely different game, which all of a sudden is getting everyone who's racing at the same benchmarks to turn their head and go, well, what are they doing over there, and why are they
Yeah.
doing that? Are we missing a trick here?
Yeah. And I mean, listen, every time it's not just walking into the Best Western Plus and seeing the white bed. Like, anytime I go into a cool hotel anywhere in the world, I'm like, wow, like this is like, that this owes itself to those days of W, which owed itself to like Ian Traeger and his boutique hotels, which owed itself to Marriott to bringing it to scale. I mean, so it really is interesting.
Well, speaking of Marriott and Starwood, of course, that ended in one of the biggest M&A deals of
I think it was
the
the
industry.
biggest, right? Yeah, I think it was the biggest. No.
I think it is still the biggest, yes, and that is something that you were on the front lines, in the inner circle from the very beginning, so I'm gonna ask you for some inside baseball around what was really happening behind the scenes.
Oh man. Like, well, I mean, it was typical Starwood fashion. Starwood didn't do anything like straightforward or boring. Like, of course, we couldn't just be like straightforward acquired. We had to be acquired by like our biggest rival. And then like, the Chinese company, Anbang, I can't remember their name. They
Yep,
had to come in like, and at the 11th hour, and they offered more. So they bid it up. And then we were all so excited. We're like, yes, the Chinese insurance people are buying us. We're all going to be able to keep our jobs and do our thing. And then Marriott came back, and then the Chinese company came back. And it was like, it was head spinning. I just
yeah.
remember writing these internal notes because these things always happened at like 11 o'clock, and we'd have to rush to the lawyer's office. I've never been so like spent so much time in like a law firm in my entire life. Um, Funny aside, my friend who does M&A told me that like every time the deal gets cold, the food gets worse in the law firm. And anytime the deal heats up, the food gets better. So like one day it'd be like filet mignon and lobster, and then it would be like hamburgers. But anyway, that is another story. But anyway, I just remember writing these notes, trying to fill in the entire company and what was happening. And they were, of course, reading about it in the Wall Street Journal and watching on CNBC. So it was a crazy acquisition, with lots of twists and turns. And then Marriott, of course, prevailed. And, that was like a really interesting, humbling experience. I was a part of the integration team. So, for months after announcing that the deal, they were making the acquisition, and before the close, there was like, ours was, of course, extraordinarily long because I think the Chinese were holding out approval, but I think it was like 9 months. So I was part of this integration team that was working with Marriott on the transition. And I'll never forget going to Washington, D.C. for our first meeting. It was like 20 Starwood people, and walking into a ballroom with all the Marriott people. And I mean, it felt weird, and I'm like, I'm getting a
Mhm.
little teary thinking about it. And, it's just weird. It was just super weird. And so we walk in, and they all stood up and they clapped, and like Arnie came over and hugged all of us. And, they were just like such good stand-up people. And it was like such a warm culture. And, you know, I really grew so impressed with the culture and the sense of family at Marriott and all of the things. But it was weird. And
Yeah.
then of course we had to walk back this rivalry because for over a decade we were telling 200,000 Starwood employees and 250,000 Starwood employees like, they're boring. We're not. We're cool. And then it was like, oh, just kidding. And you have to remember that, like, yes, I was losing my job, and probably a couple thousands of us at the corporate level were losing our jobs, but the vast majority, hundreds of thousands of people were staying. And so
Mhm.
we had to walk back that Marriott rivalry.
Yeah.
And I remember we did a funny video with Mark Von Drasek and John Payton, um, that we aired at some, I don't know, one of those big meetings, that had John and Mark apologizing to Mr. Marriott. In Marriott's, they have the picture, the portrait of Bill Marriott,
Yeah.
and they were like standing like on their knees, like, we're sorry, Mr. Marriott, for saying XYZ. And I was sitting next to Arnie. Arnie was there, and he's like, inside joke. And I'm like, yeah. Anyway, there was a lot of goodness that came out of that. Man, I'm a happy Bon Boy person. So
Yeah, you're right though. I mean, it was weird at first, and I remember, going to Bethesda where Marriott's headquarters was, and people would kinda, like, look each other up and down in the elevator and be like, "Hi, I'm Katie from Starwood, and I'm so and so from Marriott." And actually, one of the things that made me feel better about that was you telling us about how when you joined Starwood, it was, "I'm so and so from Westin, I'm so and so from
yeah,
Sheridan," and kinda showed me that, like, normalcy will come again. It's just gonna
yes,
be awkward at first because, like you said, unfortunately, and this is why mergers and acquisitions happen, it meant we were saying a lot of goodbyes to people we really
yeah,
respected and admired at Starwood, including yourself.
yeah. And I remember like those days, and you'll remember this, I think. Like I knew pretty early on. I mean, I knew like from day one that I was going to be fired because Arnie had made it really clear that he was going to stick with his senior team, and which is as to be expected. Um, so I knew right away, like my days, this was my swan song. But I was obsessed with my job, my team all getting jobs if
Yeah.
they wanted them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there were a couple of things that it became like Marriott was going around visiting different teams and that sort of thing. It was kind of like corporate Survivor. And I remember we put on like the best dog and pony and presentation for the Marriott team. And I remember John Payton, who was my great colleague at Starwood, was like, that was the best presentation I've ever seen. And I was like, we worked so hard on that and like we really wowed them. And they were very interested in how we did comms and PR and how we connected with younger generations. But there was also this really funny thing that happened. I think you'll remember this. We had I think Debbie Marriott and Trish Primrose, who was my counterpart at Marriott, and a whole gaggle of Marriott people coming to do like a brainstorming again during this period before we close. And it was a way for you guys to really show your stuff. And so they were coming to our office in New York City, our innovation center. And so the day before, we set up the room like a cool hackathon, like we did. And,
Mhm.
we had uh, totally tricked out. It was cool. And we had big things hanging on the wall, big press clips and toys and candy. And I don't know, it was just cool. You guys always did a great job at that. And I remember the night before leaving at like 6 o'clock. I'm like, I'm going to go home. And I left Ashley Chapman and Katie Roberts there, and they were doing some last minute zhuzhing. Um, and someone else, I can't remember. Anyway, I left them there and I said, okay, go home, get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow's about like winning jobs. And I woke up and like I had all these texts like, oh my God, we have the best idea. It's like 1 in the morning. Like, oh my God, this is gonna slay. We want to tell you, but we don't want to tell you. We want to surprise you. We think you're gonna love it. And like on and on and on. And then in the morning it was like, well, you might not love it. We might not do it. Marriott might think we're weird. Fuck it. We don't care if Marriott thinks we're weird. We're gonna do it. And I was like, oh my God, what have they done? And I walked into the office and it's like 8:30 in the morning. Again, this like whole, you know, gang from DC was coming down, including Debbie Marriott and Trisha Primrose and what have you, these executives. And we had this crazy DJ. He was like shirtless, covered in tats. Like the girls had seen him at some club the night before. And like hired him on the spot and said, "Come to our office tomorrow morning for the Marriott people and, do a set or whatever." And I just cracked up and I was like, kind of like, I'm so glad they didn't ask me because I probably would have been like, "I don't know, guys." Um, but I love that they just had like the chutzpah to do that. And
Yeah.
it was taking such a risk and it was so fun and it like worked. I mean, it definitely said these people are creative and think differently.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, that
I
was like
think
one of my
that
favorite
that is
moments
such a
there.
testament to your leadership, and we're gonna talk about that more in a little bit, but it's exactly what Barry did for you in terms of giving the permission to try things, and no offense to Katie and Ashley, who are still dear, dear friends of mine to this day. Not sure if the shirtless DJ for a corporate meeting is as successful as the Westin Heavenly Bed, but I love the creativity and I love those guys. So
Well, and the risk taking, right? I mean, like they had
exactly.
everything to lose. I had nothing to lose. It didn't matter to me. I mean, it did because I wanted them, but and it worked. It worked. It was great.
Exactly. Well, speaking of what was next for you, you were weighing a handful of options when you were
Mhm.
leaving. What was the thinking in your head that made you choose Bacardi, or how did you sort through all of those decisions? Keeping up with online reviews across platforms is tough, but FeedCheck makes it easier by bringing all reviews from all channels into one place. In addition to tracking your own feedback, you can even monitor competitors to see how you compare. They provide deep insights into customer sentiment, trending topics, common issues, and patterns that might otherwise be overlooked. Plus, real time alerts mean you can respond quickly before things escalate, and AI powered suggestions help you craft better responses. So, if you want to stay ahead of your reputation, book a demo with FeedCheck at feedcheck.co/sweet success or through the link in the podcast notes.
Yeah, like I said, I had a long time to get used to the idea that I had to find a new job, and I'll never
Right.
forget Arnie called me like with the official news on a Saturday. Both of my kids had play dates, so there were like 20 kids in my house, and he very nicely said, this is it. I'm going with my team, and
Yeah.
I've always admired what you've done and all the nice things, and he was super nice about it. But
Yeah.
like after I hung up the phone, I had to take to my bed, and I had like a good cry for 2 days.
Yeah.
And then I got out of my bed and I say, "Okay, like, let's go. Like, my next chapter is happening." And by the way, I probably would still be at Starwood Hotels to this day. Like, I just thought
Yeah.
I'd be there forever, retire,
Me
and
too.
then be like platinum forever or whatever. Um, but like, I didn't even have a resume done. I mean, it was like cuckoo. So anyway, so I said, let's go and like, let's make this change really count for good. So I worked with a coach to sort of decide what my priorities were for both professionally and from a personal standpoint and family standpoint. And anyway, long and short of it, I was offered this wonderful job at Visa, the job I actually have now,
Hmm.
to be the chief communications officer at Visa. And it was like Visa was a rocket ship of a company because it was this point in time where there was really this acceleration of people around the world moving from cash to digital payments. So, I
Hmm.
mean, the business was on fire. Super smart management team. I mean, talking about an amazing business. I wanted that job so much. There was just one problem, and it was that it was in San Francisco, which was really far from my center of gravity on the East Coast, and my kids were at an age where I wasn't really into that. And then, and I was probably gonna do it, but then Bacardi came in at the 11th hour, and I was like, "Bacardi, like the rum?" And I didn't drink spirits or anything. And anyway, long and short of it, in like I had been interviewing with Visa for like 5 months, and Bacardi I interviewed with for like I interviewed with the CEO like the day after I took a phone call. I interviewed with the chairman, Facundo Bacardi, a week later. I had that job within a week, within 7 days.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, okay, on paper, Visa's definitely the right job. Bacardi was a much smaller company, it wasn't public, all the things. But I was like, the Bacardi job would be really fun. And I was like, I could use some fun in my life after the
Mhm.
last couple of years that I've had. And frankly, I needed more time with my family. Because you know how our jobs were at Starwood. They were insane. And
Yeah.
we traveled so much and hours were late and it was crisis prone. And I was like, I really need this time with my family. And so I took the Bacardi job, moved to Bermuda. Um, I'll never forget when I was struggling with that decision, Adam Aaron, another one of our other CEOs at Starwood and longtime
Mhm.
board member. I was talking to him about it. I was like, I got to take the visa job, right? And he's like, you know what, Casey? He's like, I always say, take the fun job. Like,
Mm,
it'll work out. And I ended up learning so much at Bacardi because it was a smaller company. I was on the executive team. We had real business challenges amidst great brands. And I learned so much about business. And it was like such a great family experience living in Bermuda with my family. My CEO at the time said, there's nothing better than moving abroad with your family because you're all experiencing something new together. My
yeah,
kids were like preteens. We weathered COVID there. Um, it was like the best life experience. And you know what? Visa didn't go anywhere. Here I am.
right.
So it worked
And
out
based in New
great.
York with Visa now, right?
Yeah, so I'm in New York. I spent a lot of time in San Francisco, but we have a much bigger New York presence today than we did then. And I'm in
Yeah,
San Francisco all the time. And, post COVID, things are a little bit more fluid that way, right?
yeah.
Location wise. So, and I still, it's so great because Visa was like the guy that got away. Like
Mm.
I always thought about Visa. My husband was like every once in a while be like, "Have you paid any attention to Visa stock?" I'm like, "No, I won't look at it." And Vasant Prabhu, our longtime CFO from Starwood was there, who I just admired so much. And so anyway, so I always paid attention to Visa. And again, I was always like a pang of like, what if? And now I'm here.
Mhm.
Life works out great.
I love that because you actually prioritized yourself and you didn't do what you should have done. You did
Yeah.
what you wanted to do and what was really personally important to you, and I know how career motivated and obviously successful you are. So that
Yeah.
was not an easy thing for you to do, I could imagine, and yet you had this incredible experience with Bacardi and you still got Visa on the other side in a way that worked
Totally.
much more for you as opposed to moving permanently to San Francisco.
No, for sure. And that's what I always say to people, to younger people in business, like like a job is like your career is a marathon. So there's like different at different times in your career, you got to do different things based on like your life cycle, and what's happening with your family and where you want to live or not live or stay or not stay. And eventually Bacardi, it was I had to get back to the United States. I was like, my kids are going to school on the East
Yeah.
Coast and it's time to come back. And, and I also felt like I had one more big public company gig in me. So anyway, but it was the first time that I like did something with my heart professionally versus my head.
Mm. And speaking of life cycles and comebacks, recently we saw a rebirth of sorts of Starwood
Yay!
Hotels with
We
Barry
did.
announcing that he was renaming SH Hotels to Starwood Hotels. So what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I have to tell you, I have a little inside baseball there. So I was in Aspen over New Year's, and I was at the Viceroy Hotel with my family having dinner, and in walks Barry, who I've seen periodically over the years. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, Barry!" And I gave him a big hug, and he was with a bunch of friends, and I was with my family, and we introduced them, and he's like, "Oh my God!" Like, remember, I was pregnant with my first daughter on the day in which he left Starwood, which is like
Wow.
a whole other intrigue. Um, and I remember he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're pregnant," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're leaving." Like, anyway, um, but anyway, so we had like the best catch up, and it was so cute because he said to my kids, he's like, "God, your mom and I did like the craziest things together. We had so much fun." And that really meant a lot to me. It's also
Yeah.
getting teary. Um, because we really did do cool things. And anyway, and he's like, "Oh my God, I've got something to tell you. You can't tell anyone." He's like, "I'm buying back Starwood." He's like, "The deal's about to close. There's gonna be a story in the New York Times in a couple weeks." But he was so excited. He's like, he's like, "I've been thinking about this for so long. I'm so excited to do this. Like, our brands are on fire. We're opening here, there, everywhere." And he's like, "I'm going to spend a ton of time on it." Um, and, I was like, people are going to be so excited. I was like, Starwood people are going to freak out. Like,
Yeah.
we're all still in contact. We have our Facebook and LinkedIn, pages and whatever. I'm like, people are going to love this and freak out. So I really had to like zip it and keep a secret. And then, of course, I said, "Oh my gosh, Daphne, my daughter, you should go work for Barry." I was like, "Even the hotel business is a great place to start a career." And he said, "Well, you know where to find me." So, Barry, 2 years' time,
Oh
Daphne's
my
coming your way.
gosh. Oh my
She's a
gosh, I
hustler.
love that. What I loved about that announcement, and like you referenced the New York Times piece, to me, everything about it was so what we did well at Starwood, which was taking things that aren't really big news and somehow making it big news.
Yeah.
When we launched Star Lab, the new office for Starwood,
Oh my god.
most companies
That
would
was
be
like
like,
eating a
"We have a
mountain out
new."
of a molehill, right?
Most companies would be like, "It's a new office." And if you tried to pitch it to a journalist, they'd be like, "Cool, like, nothing really to talk about
Whatever.
there."
Yeah.
And we were able to find creative ways to make stories out of it and little storytelling moments throughout. And that
We
that was
brought
really what I
journalists
s
from around the world to that random office on where was it? It was like across from the Lord& and Taylor.
No, we rebranded the whole area too. It
Oh my
wasn't it was the garment district, even though it was very much Midtown.
oh my gosh, that was hilarious. Yeah, we really did know how to make a yarn.
Exactly, and that's what I felt with that story too, was when most companies rebrand or change their name, it's like, "Okay, now we get the new URL and that's it," but yet here it was again, Starwood making waves with just a name change, getting a New York Times feature story, and then kicking
Totally.
off, such sentiment around the world of people being excited to see what that means next.
Oh my god, all those, like, loyalty junkies are so excited, but, I always bet on always bet on Barry.
Mhm, mhm. Well, speaking of Barry and what his leadership meant to you, I wanna go back to talking about your leadership at Starwood. I'll never forget watching the way that you ran your weekly meetings with the global comms team. And honestly, seeing that creativity and the brilliance around the table, it was super inspiring to me as a new hire and then even throughout my whole time with you guys. And very intimidating as well. I remember looking around that room and going, "How did I get in here? And when are they gonna find out and kick me out of here?" But honestly, it was being a part of that team, of having the opportunity to learn from you, to learn from my colleagues. It made me a better communicator then, and I think to this day, it has made me a better communicator. So, how did you think about hiring, training, and motivating your team then? And I imagine very much still the way you lead now.
Wow, I have to say, like, I think a lot about management and leadership, and mostly because I was really bad at it in the beginning. I was thrust into I think I haven't had, like, a functional boss since I was 25 years old.
Wow.
So, I was kinda, like, back in my day when women had babies, they'd leave. So, like, all of a sudden, at 25 years old, I was leading comms for Hyatt, like, sort of ahead of my time, and I wasn't very mature. And so, I didn't really know how to lead people. I was like an individual contributor. I was pretty hard driving. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a family. All I had to do was work. And I'm not sure I was the best boss. And then, couple that with being at Starwood, which was creative but intense.
Mhm,
Remember Palace Intrigue, with lots of rough elbows. So I think I got some bad habits and then entered Fritz Van Passion. And I think to me, he is always like my leadership mentor, guru, touchstone, someone I think about literally every day in the way that he led. And, I think what Fritz did was he respected people so much and he gave people, we didn't call it this at the time because the phrase didn't exist. He gave people psychological safety.
hmm,
If Barry kind of gave you like a creative license, Fritz really gave you like a stage to talk and share your ideas and not be intimidated, and he really busted through hierarchy and all that kind of stuff. So um I learned a lot from that and watching like good leaders and also watching bad leaders because we had some real doozies at Starwood. But the way I thought about it is I like to hire young, smart, and then very importantly, nice people. I like to give them the freedom to do things and be creative and pitch their ideas and feel safe pitching their ideas. Um, I like to have fun. Like we really celebrated at Starwood whenever we had a launch or an introduction of a new product or a big crisis period or whatever. We would go out and we would celebrate and we would have fun together. I mean, we were crazy hardworking, but we had fun doing it. Um, And I really wanted to make sure that everyone on my team was getting a lot of interesting, good, diverse experience. I wanted everyone on my team to be able to be a chief communications officer when they left Starwood. And I
Mm,
think one of the proudest things in my career is all of my direct reports, literally all of my direct reports at
yeah.
Starwood went on to become chief communications officers. So that was really important. But I don't know, like when I kind of think about Starwood in particular, I was like, my philosophy was like, if if a kid comes in and they have a good idea and it doesn't cost $1 million, like let's let it rip. Let's let them try it. And I think that's why we connected to next generation so well. I remember the Marriott marketing people were like, "What is your like, your millennial program?" I was like, we were like, "What? A millennial program? Like your next gen program?" I'm like, "We what? We were confused. We don't have that." And like, no, we just, like, tell those young people at work to, like, go do their thing and, like, market to people like they would market to themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never forget this, like, we did the reopening, I think, of the St. Regis, New York, which was, like, for us, a big deal. That was obviously, like, a
Sure.
huge flagship hotel for us. It was very fancy luxury hotel, and we were doing the opening party, and I remember Simon Negris came in, and he came in with, like, the list of who was gonna attend, our VIPs, and, I was expecting, like, Gwyneth Paltrow, Nicole Kidman, George Clooney, and I get this list, and I like, who are these people? Like, it was like, no one I was like, "Simon," and I was, like, getting mad. I was like, "Oh my god, Simon, like, where are the celebrities?" He's like, "No, no, no. These are Instagram people." It was, like, before it was, like, right when Instagram launched, and we didn't even have the word influencers. I was like, "What do you mean Instagram people? It like, where's the New York Times?" He's like, "No, no. They're gonna post on Instagram." And I was like, "To who?" And he's like, "Trust me, Casey. Trust me. It's much cooler this way." And I was like, "Okay. All right. Whatever." And so I trusted, but I trusted him, and I knew he would do something cool, and it was
Yeah.
cool. And we were
Oh,
like we were one of the first brands to play it with influencers.
absolutely. And I saw you do that. I saw you give the interesting, diverse experiences firsthand. I mean, I will never forget, you've named so many names there that have been guests of the podcast, including Trey Sarton, who was my boss at the time. He was one of your direct reports, and just like you
Yeah.
said, has been a chief communications officer since leaving your guys. But I remember meeting with him, and I was fairly new on the team still, and he had said to me, we have these big regional meetings coming up, and Casey is going to identify a member of the team to attend each of them. And she's chosen you to go to the APAC conference in Sanya, which I had to Google even where Sanya was because I had never heard of it before. And I
Well,
was
you
like,
weren't alone.
I
That
was
was
like,
a
me?
Chinese Florida meets Hawaii meets Scottsdale, right? Yeah.
And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. But I was just it was such a pinch me moment of like, wait, Casey knows my name, let alone like she wants me to go. And I was like, okay, what's my job? Like, what am I doing while I'm there? And he was like, you're going on behalf of the global comms team, meet people, listen, have a good time, like learn. I'm like, wait, what? I don't know if you remember that because that was so long
I
ago and it
do.
was one of
I
many
do.
things that you did, but it was so
That was by
impactful.
design. I do. We were very intentional about that, about getting like new joiners on the road to these far flung places like really soon in their tenure. And
Yeah.
we did it for like a couple very deliberate reasons. One, um, it was self-preservation because I mean I traveled so much. I was like, I can't go to China like 25 times in 1 year. I can go to China
Yeah.
like 5 times in 1 year. So we had so much travel. So some of it was self-preservation and selfishness. Um, Two, it was about global awareness because Starwood was so global, and that
Yeah.
was really something that made us unique was this global footprint. So people needed to have global awareness on our team. Three, it was about putting you in the mindset that we are there to serve hotels and
Mhm.
global and headquarters. Our job is to serve the hotels, not
Mhm.
vice versa. So, like, needed you to put yourself in the the shoes rather of our hotels and our GMs and our comms people on the ground. Like you said, it was like a pinch me moment, and so I thought of it as like this amazing perk and retention strategy because I remember my first business trip was going to St. Louis, and I remember calling my parents and being like, "I'm going to St. Louis. They're sending me on business." And there's something that, when you're early in your career, like, wow, they trust me. And so
Yes.
when you go home and you say, "I'm going to Sanya Island," you have to Google it. It's somewhere in China. And I remember Ashley Chapman, we sent her to India, like, right when she
Mhm.
started, had tons of people to Dubai and
Mhm.
all over the place. You know, you get to go home and tell your partner, your mom, your dad, your siblings, like, "I'm going to Dubai." Like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, and this was really important to me, like, I always traveled with, like, the newest kid on the team, like, when I had one of these, like, far-flung trips, because I wanted to break down the hierarchy. And, like, nothing breaks down like the boss, you know, not boss relationship, like being on the back of like some rickety bus in rural China with no air conditioning and like 100 degrees, like you kind of lose your airs,
Yeah.
right? And then we can talk to each other like you and I are talking now, like real people. And I know you'll share your ideas, and I know you'll tell me if you think we can do something better. And I know you'll tell me like if you think I should be doing something differently because we've kind of broken down those boundaries.
Right, right. That's so interesting to hear from your perspective because from my side, it did all of that, and it made me aware that you were aware of me, which that is really just
Katie,
powerful.
I was aware of you. I remember your first day like it was yesterday. I bet you'll remember this. So you were coming from, I think, Christian Dior or Michael Kors or
Michael
some
Kors, yep.
fabulous watch. You walk in and there's this like gorgeous, like tall, beautiful blonde woman with this like super, fancy, fashion background. And we took you to like some fish shack in Stamford, Connecticut, not glamorous. And I was like, "Oh my god, she's gonna, like, run in her high heels back to Madison Avenue." And then, like, you were just so cool and smart and awesome. I was intimidated by you.
Oh my that's hysterical. I feel like I paid you to say that because I had the
No.
exact opposite experience. I was like, "How did I get let in here? These people are so amazing, and I hope I don't say something wrong that makes them rescind the offer on the spot."
No. That was where it didn't happen.
But you know what? It bought a massive amount of loyalty from me to the company, and it
Yeah.
motivated me to make sure that first trip, which wasn't actually my first trip, there were so many incredible trips, but it made sure that I really maximized that opportunity. I was like, "Casey chose me to be here. I'm gonna meet as
Yeah.
many people as I can. I'm gonna take as many notes. I'm gonna make the most of this." And I just think that's so rare in a time when especially for more junior employees, many companies are focused on expense control as
Yeah.
opposed to that one amount of money, which wasn't cheap by any means. Like you said, I would probably still be at Starwood to this day if the company still existed.
Well, you can always go back.
Yeah, now the door is open
By
again.
the
I
way,
guess
you
you're
gotta
right.
have Barry on here, Katie. Like, we gotta dial up Barry, get him on here, especially now he's got such good news. He loves this.
One thing I have to ask you about before I ask you the last 3 questions that I ask everyone. We've mentioned a lot of names that have been guests of the podcast who, like I said, graduates of the school of Casey Kavanagh School of Communications, my name for it. Trey, Simon, Anjali Mera. Also, Fritz has been a guest of the podcast, John Payton, a lot of Starwood loyalty here. And one of your famous pieces of advice that you give the team that are still words I live by to this day, Katie and Ashley, who you mentioned, they live by to this day. No corporate dancing. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I literally meant no corporate dancing because I sort of like don't do it. But I think sort of what I meant, and I learned I it was definitely crystallized to me at Bacardi, was like, you know, it's still corporate. Like, you have fun, don't have that much fun. But one of my favorite friends at Bacardi, who was the president of North America, by the way, Bacardi was like a teetotaler place. Like people really like kept it together. Which
Mm.
was surprising. There were more marathoners at Bacardi than any company I've ever worked for. But anyway, I remember before the holiday party, every year he would say, "I've never seen anyone get promoted because of the holiday party, but I've seen lots of people get fired. So,
Mhm.
you know, keep it together, be cool." But I literally meant don't dance. And by the way, I do now corporate dance. Like after being a big party, we were Latin, I corporate dance.
I still do not, and I still think of you every time. I think it's fantastic advice. But last 3 questions for you that I ask
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah.
and the first one, I know you're gonna have a really long list to sort through. What was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
Okay, because I listen to your show, I don't. I'm zipping it. There's too many. There's just too many. There's been so many. But one of late that really took me by surprise and was amazing was I went using all Bonvoy points with my son to look at colleges a
Mm.
few weeks ago. And one of our stops, and we like they were all cool hotels. It was great. One of our stops was the Moxie in Boulder, Colorado. And like all of my friends were like, you have to stay at the Moxie. I'm like, really? I have to stay at the Moxie? Okay. Like I thought it was like just one of these, like, I don't know, like Me Too courtyards or whatever. Oh my gosh. Boy, did this hotel nail like college town cool like I've never seen before. And it was so well designed. The lobby was so fun. There were college kids at the front desk with all this like cool energy. The room that we stayed in, it was my son and I staying together. It was a loft. So he was like up on a loft and I was down in a bed, and
Mm,
it was like designed like the most tricked out dorm room you've ever seen. And I was like, this hotel for like a college town has absolutely nailed it.
yeah.
And there were like surprise and delights at every turn. So I don't know who is responsible for the Moxie brand at Marriott, but you are awesome. Whoever owns that hotel, fantastic job. But it
Wow.
was like it was wonderful, and it goes to show you it doesn't just have to be like the gritty palace
Right.
that turns your head.
Right.
Um, but what a wonderful hotel experience, and, like, really inspiring to me. And now I want him to go to Boulder so that I can stay at the Moxie Hotel, and I hope the Moxie Hotel owner is listening because I'm sure it gets really filled up at, like
And you need some,
like, parents' weekend.
Star Hot friends and family discounts to be extended.
Totally, and I do love my Bon Boy. Thank you, Bon Boy.
There we go. On the
Yeah.
flip side of that amazing experience, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had? The next time you're traveling or celebrating an important occasion, book a photographer photo shoot. They make it easy to capture memories by connecting you with hand picked professional photographers in over 350 destinations around the world. I should know. Capturing memories with family and friends is super important to me, and I've booked flytographers from Maine to Paris to London. A flytographer shoot is an essential part of every trip I plan. They also have an incredible affiliate and travel advisor program. Add a photo shoot to your customer's next itinerary and earn 10% commission. Visit flytographer.com/sweet success for $25 off your first shoot or to sign up as an affiliate or travel advisor. That's FLYTOGRAPHER.com/sweet, like hotel suite success.
I think I blocked it out, but, like, anytime there's, like, an ogre at the front desk that, like, should not be allowed to ever step foot in a hotel or be in the hotel business, it's such a turn off, and I would say it happens, like, 1 in 5 trips. I'm like, You should go be, like, working at the CVS." I mean, do they even have people who work at the CVS anymore? I mean, but this is not the right profession for you, and I think hotels should put their rising stars at the front desk, and or they're like, the kids that come out of hotel school that want to do this for a career, because that is your first and sometimes only impression
Yeah.
of the staff at hotels, and it really matters.
Yeah.
So anyway,
And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, a person, a brand who you think has truly mastered it?
oh God, I know you ask everybody this, and it's like so hard. I don't. To me, hospitality is like elevated, thoughtful, and caring experiences. And again, I think of Moxie. Elevated doesn't just mean like the highest high-end luxury like the St. Regis or the Ritz or something, but just thoughtful, curated, makes you feel a little bit special, even if you're there just one night for business. And a brand that I think about that does that for me right now is Veronica Beard.
Hmm.
I'm literally dressed in head to toe Veronica Beard. And like, if you're a career woman these days, it's like just like practically the only brand where you can buy kind of like cool work clothes. Um, but in a retail environment where you walk into a store and people are indifferent and like the inventory is crappy and like, you know, people are unmotivated in retail, like they have found the formula where they create this cool experience. They sort of invite you to sit on the sofa when you walk in their store on Madison Avenue. They have parties and benefits and all kinds of events there. They really program it just like we programmed hotels. Um, Beautifully decorated. The clothes are like classic with a twist, but man, they get the best people to work there. I mean, the women that work at Veronica Beard, not just on Madison Avenue, but all the stores, are just, they're cool, they're caring, they're kind. They remind me of our team at Starwood. They have the whole package. And I know it's very deliberate in how they hire people, and they produce a great product and a great experience.
Well,
So go over on a
Casey,
beer.
yeah, absolutely. And Casey, it has just been an absolute, absolute honor and a privilege to have you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh my gosh, what a ball. Thank you for taking me down memory lane, and the future lives on with Starwood. So can't wait to see what Barry and the gang do next. Thank you, Katie.
All right, everyone, it's time for today's sweet summary where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. I am not exaggerating when I say that Casey is one of the most brilliant, talented, and inspiring leaders I've ever had the privilege of working for. And after listening to that episode, I imagine you can see why. Casey shared so many gems of wisdom during that discussion, something that happens anytime you talk to her, genuinely. But the biggest takeaway for me was all about giving yourself permission to play a different game. When hotel legend Bill Marriott called Barry Sternlicht a kid with a backpack, everyone rushed to Casey to ask, "What are you going to do about it?" Now, every comms person listening knows exactly what that feels like to have a fire land in your desk. But rather than put it out, Casey turned it into fuel. She printed out clip art of a backpack and handed out copies around the office. What was meant to be an insult became a symbol, a rallying cry. She encouraged the company to own it. We are the kid with the backpack. Let's use that to our advantage. She knew that Starwood couldn't compete with Marriott on scale. So instead, they focused on creativity, innovation, and breaking the proverbial rules. Instead of boring hotel ribbon cutting ceremonies, they took inspiration from unexpected places, like the Victoria's Secret fashion show. They launched W Hotels, the definition of marching to the beat of your own drum, and saw demand pull prices up while foot traffic wore the floors down. The obsession was clear: be first, be bold, and be unexpected. And Casey didn't just champion that approach professionally, she embraced it personally too. After the Starwood acquisition, she gave herself permission to take the quote, fun job, to prioritize time with her family, to say no to a move she didn't want to make. That decision led to a role that challenged her in unexpected ways. And side note, spending lockdown in Bermuda doesn't sound too bad to me. Life has a funny way of working out when we allow ourselves to be, well, ourselves. And that visa job came back around, but this time on her own terms. She spoke with deep admiration about two leaders who shaped her approach: Barry Sternlicht, who gave her creative license, and Fritz Van Passion, who provided psychological safety, something creativity needs to flourish. And from my own time working with Casey, I can tell you she embodies both. Whether she's sending you to Sonia or giving you the green light to hire a DJ for a corporate presentation, Casey leads with courage, curiosity, and a whole lot of fun, just the kind of leader you'd follow anywhere. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.